Today, we confer an honorary degree on the Honorable Cory Booker, United States Senator. Senator Cory Booker, a U.S. Senator from New Jersey, has committed his life to public service. In 1996, Senator Booker moved to Newark, New Jersey, and founded a nonprofit organization to provide legal services for low-income families, helping tenants take on slumlords, improve their living conditions, and stay in their homes. At age 29, he was elected to the Newark City Council, and beginning in 2006, he served as Newark's mayor for more than 7 years. Senator Booker is the first African-American elected to the U.S. Senate from New Jersey. In the Senate, he has championed policies that advanced economic and equal justice, including leading efforts to reform the broken criminal justice system, increase wages, and ensure hard work is fairly rewarded, and to protect the rights of all Americans to breathe clean air and drink clean water. The Honorable Cory Booker, it is my great pleasure to award you with the degree of Doctor of Public Service. Please join me in congratulating Senator Booker.
Thank you, everyone. This is an extraordinary honor, and I want to thank the whole community that made this possible, not just the trustees, the faculty, and the staff, but the whole community. From the people that clean buildings and bathrooms, the people that do the staff work behind the scenes. This is a day that thousands of people have helped to make. I want to thank the families that are gathered here today. I want to especially give my gratitude to all the mothers that are here, and also to those women that understand motherhood is not about biology always. It's about caring and loving and bringing that spirit to this world. And so to the graduates, I want to get right to it, because you all give me such an honor to be a small part of this extraordinary day. And I want to tell you right now, on my graduations, my family thoroughly embarrassed me every minute that I was graduating. And my family would always, as big of a day as it might have been for me, wanted to keep my feet on the ground. My grandfather would come over and say, "Boy, I can see that the tassel was worth the hassle. But I don't understand this, boy. I'm looking at this program. You weren't magna cum laude. You weren't summa cum laude. You were just, thank you, Lottie, I'm out of here." My family wanted me to keep my feet on the ground. My dad was not impressed. I graduated undergrad. I got my master's degree. I got another degree from Oxford. On the day I was graduating from Yale Law School, my dad was like, "Boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot." Life is not about the degrees you get, young man. It's about the service that you give. My family may not have had a bunch of members who all had degrees, but they understood that what defined life was not your personal accomplishments, but it was about what you did for other people. My father and my mother lived these values. So honored to have my mom here and that the president would point her out. My mom and dad were such a special couple. My dad had married my mom. My mom had the grace and mercy to marry my dad. Because my dad was a guy who had a humble story, like so many of the graduates here. He grew up poor. In fact, if he was here right now, he would heckle me and say, "Don't tell those graduates I was poor. Tell them the truth. I was just Po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters." And my dad, when I was growing up, would not let me forget about his childhood. And in fact, every story he would tell about his childhood, it would get worse and more hard the older I got. When my dad saw me at 18 years old, luxuriating in my accomplishments, he'd say to me, "Boy, don't walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base." And with a very Funny story, which I know is not true, I know has to be apocryphal. He tried to encapsulate this message to me about life's purpose. He told me, son, I was sitting in a classroom and the teacher came in one day to talk to the boys and girls. We were sitting there and she said the first lesson's about self-esteem. Anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid, I want you to stand up right now. And my father says the boys and girls looked around as the teacher stood there impatiently. She said, come on now, stand up if you think you're dumb, you think you're stupid. I want to teach you all about self-esteem. And my father said, nobody moves, so he stood up proudly. And my father says the teacher looked at him and said, Mr. Booker boy, what's wrong with you? You think you're dumb? You think you're stupid? And my father said, he scratched his head and said, well, shucks, ma'am, I'm not stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing. My dad taught me that in life, people are going to look down on you, stand up anyway. My father told me that in life, you're gonna face bigotry and hate, but stand up anyway. In life, folk are gonna try to knock you down, but life is not determined by how many times you fall down, it's how many times you stand up. But I'll tell you this, what my father taught me was as important as it is to stand up for yourself, to use all your God's gifts to make something out of yourself. The most important standing you will do in life is when you stand up for other people. My father wanted me to know that all that I am came for people that stood up for me and my family. When my dad was born to a single mom, his mama ultimately couldn't take for him, and his grandma stood up and took care of him. When his grandma couldn't take care of him, it was people in the community, folks that were not his biology, folks that were not his blood, that stood up for him. A family that became like his own, took him into their home, put a roof over their head, food on the table. It was teachers that looked at my father and just like the president told him that he was gonna break the tradition in our family, he was gonna go to college. When he couldn't afford college, people in the community chipped in. A collection in a church helped him get down the hill and enroll in an HBCU. I am here, he would tell me, because people stood up for us. They created community that went beyond the lines that divide us and affirmed the ties that bind all of humanity. My father wanted me to live a life of affirming community, creating community, not to let anything ever slide into tribalism. We are a nation now that is suffering from that seduction to not be a beloved community, but to have a nation that is defined by us versus them, a fear-based culture, a divide, a conquer, but that's not our traditions. Everyone is here because of a beloved community, because of people that stood up to create community. As my dad would say, we are all the physical manifestations of a conspiracy of love. Life is not about the big action, the big deed. My father would say, reject the great man theory of history. We are all here because of ordinary Americans in ordinary circumstances showing extraordinary kindness and grace and decency and love. But I want to tell you that in life, vulnerability is not a bad thing. I could stand up here and tell you that I've been a great exponent of these values that I'm talking about, but I haven't. I've struggled every day to live up to my parents' example of what kindness and decency is. My parents who showed me by example, hey, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. When somebody comes at you hard like that, sometimes it's best to look at them in the eye with your spirit, say, I love you, and move on. My parents taught me that what that humorist said is true. Someone who's nice to you, but not nice to the waiter is not a nice person. My parents taught me that what this world needs is not another great leader with a title, but in life, it's about the kindnesses that you give and the community you create. And so I want to tell you one of my failures. The president said that I moved to the inner city of Newark, New Jersey. I still live in that same community now. For almost 10 years, I lived in the projects, what became public housing. Our tenant president was this woman who every day showed me the values of my parents. She created community. She held us together against a slumlord, against violence and drug dealing. Her son was even shot and killed in the 1980s in the building I would move into, and she showed me in life the definition of hope is that it's the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. That even when horrible tragedy hits, it doesn't define you. What defines you is how you respond to it. She created the beloved community in the projects, and living there for years, I tried to aspire to live up to the decency and the dignity of her and so many of the elders in that community. I would come home at night at times watching kids grow up, and one day I came home and there was a crew that hung out in the lobby, and God, these kids were amazing. One of them, named Hassan Washington, he reminded me of my dad. He was the leader of the crew of the little boys that soon became young men. He had the same dynamism, the same sense of humor, the same potential. And just like my dad, he was being raised by his grandmother a few floors below where I lived in the projects. But one day, I came home to the projects and walked into that lobby, and I smelled something in that lobby that I hadn't smelled so strong since I was on campus at Stanford University. It was marijuana. Now, we live in a justice system that is not equal. Some kids have the privilege to experiment with drugs with no consequence, but we know in America there's no difference between black and white, rich and poor for using marijuana, but our justice system treats you different if you have less money. As Brian Stevenson says, we have a justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. And I knew these kids that they didn't have the margins for error, that I knew there were some signs of trouble. I even saw some gang tags, so I intervened and started taking them out. I said, fellas, let's get out of this lobby, let's do something, let's go to a movie. I let them pick it, which was a mistake. I thought they were taking me to a movie about home improvement. It was called Saw 2. I took them out to dinner. I said that I was gonna meet them up with mentors and the professions they wanted to do, but in life, you get busy sometimes, and I got busy. What was I doing? Running for higher office, for mayor of the city, and I didn't follow through on the things I said I was gonna do. I got too caught up in a big campaign, but every night I would still come home to that lobby, and there would the kids be, and they greeted me, they cheered me, they supported me. One night I came home and they were promising me, hey man, we're gonna vote for you. We got your back. And I'm thinking to myself, thank you fellas, but you're not old enough to vote. I won that election. I became the mayor of the largest city in New Jersey. And immediately I got death threats, and so they put police, before I even swore my oath of office, they started putting police in the projects. It's one of the safest we've ever been, but if you are young kids, you don't want to hang out in the lobby with police officers. And so I lost track of the kids for a few weeks. I became mayor of the city, and I started responding to every shooting in the city, showing up myself, telling our community we were going to overcome this violence. One day, weeks into my time as mayor, I show up on a street corner, one body covered on the ground, another one being raced to the ambulance for yet another shooting in our country. And I confess to you, my graduates, that I barely affirmed the humanity wasted on that sidewalk. I turned to minister to the living. But that night I came home back to the projects trying to steal a few hours of sleep, and I was going through my BlackBerry back then, and I was looking at the reports, and then I saw the report of the murder, homicide. I saw the age, and then I saw the name, Hassan Washington. Something broke in me at that moment. I stared at that screen, praying to God that that name would change. But he was killed. The guy that was just like my dad, that the God had put right in front of me, but I was too busy to follow through, to follow up. He was my father, the same wit and the same humor. And while my dad had a community that wrapped themselves around him, that saved his life, that sent him on a different trajectory, I failed the test. I will never forget the day of his funeral. It was in a funeral home in Newark that has one basement room where his body was being displayed. And I used to hate going into that room for this perverse American tradition that was so often seen in communities like mine where parents are burying their children. And I went down a rickety staircase feeling like I was descending into the bowel of a ship where we were chained together in grief, where we were moaning and groaning, piled in on top of each other, crowded in. Everyone was there, from his high school, from the community, from his teachers to his neighbors. We were all there for his death. But where were we for his life? Graduates, I have made mistakes. I have stumbled and fallen, but you are not defined in life by your mistakes and your failures. You're defined by how you are willing to get up and keep fighting. I have learned that sometimes courage is not defined by a big speech or a big moment in life. Sometimes courage is that small voice in your ear early in the morning that gives you the strength to keep going, just to get out of bed, put on your clothes, and go back outside for another day of trying, of caring, of loving, of serving. And so let me end with the words of that tenant president I mentioned before, Miss Virginia Jones, who saved me on more than one moment when I was broken. Because in life, when your heart is broken, and I'm telling you right now, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. You will encounter heartache. You will have heartbreak. And what will define you is if you have in those moments your heart breaks down or does it break open. And so after the death of another teenager, I came down through my elevators, walked through the lobby of my building, and something in the back of my head reminded me that this was the lobby that Miss Jones's son was murdered. And I came out into the courtyard early in the morning, feeling like I was 100 feet underwater, my heart broken, screaming for help. And there I saw Miss Virginia Jones. But her back was to me, and I just stood there and stared at her back, and she must have heard my cries. She turns around and she sees me. And she doesn't say a word. All she does is exactly what I needed, a small gesture that was a massive act of grace. She just opened her arms, and I knew she was opening them for a hug. Now, I'm 6'3", former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. But I ran across that courtyard like a little boy, and I ran into her arms, and she held me, and I broke, and I started sobbing. Sobbing tears of shame, tears of pain, tears of hurt. And all she did was say two words to me over and over that I want to leave you with. They're two words that have nothing to do about organized religion. They have nothing to do with pie in the sky when you die. These two words are about who we are and how we got here. It's about how to live even in moments when you don't live up to these words. She said two words over and over. Two words that I've held on the toughest days of when I was mayor. Two words I've held when I've stumbled and fell. Two words I've even said as a United States Senator to myself as I feel like I'm banging my head against implacable walls of resistance. As she rubbed my back as I wept on her shoulder in that courtyard, she said over and over again, "Stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful." Class of 2019, we have come this far by faith. The faith of our ancestors, their love and their kindness. We are the result of a conspiracy of love. Stay faithful in your journey. Stay faithful in kindness and in decency. Stay faithful in the grace that you give, because this world needs a revival of grace. Stay faithful And if you give this kind of faith, not in the big moments, but in the everyday moments, if you show this kind of spirit, you will heal this world. You will create community. You will be the weavers that tighten the bonds of humanity and show what true strength is. Class of 2019, stay faithful. God bless you.